Hello, welcome to an Indie Author Mindset podcast special. We've got a very special guest today who I'll introduce you to in just a few moments. But first of all, I need to tell you this podcast is gratefully sponsored by Ingram Spark, the award-winning indie publishing platform that offers authors like you a way to get your paperbacks and hardbacks into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. Let Ingram Spark take care of the details so you can focus on what you do best, which is, of course, writing. Get started today at ingramspark.com. Now, I mentioned this is a guest special. The episodes of the Indie Author Mindset podcast that seem to attract the most attention and get more feedback than any others are the ones where I speak to people who've overcome adversity and real life troubles through their writing and who've got some real life experience and strategies which can help you. My guest today is Stacy Juba, and she has done exactly that. She's had to overcome all sorts of hurdles and real life difficulties just to get the time to write. And when I say she struggled to get the time to write, I mean it, because her first novel was published at the age of 18 and its sequel was published when she was 44, which is quite some weight. I think it's fair to say, Stacey, you come at this with a wealth of experience. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
I mean, like many writers, and I'm certainly not discounting myself from this. Gaps in your output are something of a feature in your career, and I know a lot of us have that ourselves. I think we all know the feeling. But what's happened to you? What's meant that writing has had to take a bit of a back seat on numerous occasions over the years?
Well, with regard to my Face Off book and the sequel, my Face Off book was accepted for publication when I was really young. I entered it in a contest for teenage writers, and it was published by Avon Books and did really well. But there was quite a bit of turnover at the publishing company, and by the time I had written the sequel, it was just all new editors, all new people, and it got rejected with a form letter. And then it got rejected by other publishers because they didn't want to publish a book that was like a sequel to something that initially came up from another house. And even though Face Off did well, it was reviewed in School Library Journal, Publishers Weekly. I got fan letters. That just had to go in my drawer for several years. And then over the years, I wrote several other books, but that one was, was sort of on my to-do list. I really wanted to get back to that. And then another instance where a project had to kind of take a back seat for a while was more recently. About 7 years ago, my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when she was 6 years old. She was in kindergarten. At the time, she was just started kindergarten. This was the first time that I would have both kids like in school full day. And I joined a gym, and I thought it was, I'd have time to exercise. And I was working on a humorous novel, a really lighthearted book called Fooling Around with Cinderella. And then just over the course of that fall, she just started having more and more symptoms. I brought her to the doctor a couple of times. They kept telling me she was like anxiety for school, that she was adjusting to kindergarten and everything. And then, but like a couple of days after Christmas, it just was blatantly obvious that she had diabetes. I knew it in my heart. So I took her to the doctor, and, they, when they took her blood sugar, it was like too high even for the finger stick to read. So she was in the hospital for a few days. And when she was discharged, it was just very overwhelming. I mean, she had to be on shots on insulin like forever. She was only 6, so it was just a really, really hard time. We didn't like our nurses that were at the doctor that they hooked us up with. They were
It's another one of those examples, I guess, of life getting in the way, and those
Yeah.
times where writing has to take a back seat, doesn't it? But I know we've spoken before, and you said that you've taken some time off at the time to look after your daughter and to read up about type 1 diabetes and get and know everything so that you could set yourself up for that. And writing had to take a back seat, but you managed to get yourself back into that, didn't you? And I know a few times in your life you've said you've had these challenges. How have you managed to overcome those and find time in your life for writing? What kind of, I guess, productivity strategies, or what ways have you managed to kind of divide things and find that clear blue water there for some writing?
I think first, like if you're going through something big like that, like a health crisis for either yourself or a family member, you have to give yourself permission to take some time off and not feel guilty about it. That doesn't mean you're quitting or, but I wasn't in the mindset even to write like for a few minutes a day. I just, there was just so much going on that I had to organize in my life before I could start writing about these fictional characters. But I think it's important first to like put on your calendar, like in a month or two, that you're going to reassess where you are. And, in my case, it took she was diagnosed in December. It took me till about, let's say July before I felt like I could really get back into the project. By that time, she was on an insulin pump. We're going to Jocelyn Diabetes Center, which is like the best in the country. Yep, we loved our nurse and our doctors, and she was getting more adjusted. It was still, she's only 6 years old. It was still tough, even just changing her insulin pump site. But, I felt like we'd accepted everything and it was going to be okay. And during those last couple months, I just started getting that itch again to write. So during that, she went on the pump in June, and, we kind of learned how to do it and everything. And during that time, I was kind of putting on my calendar, okay, I really want to start writing again in August, but I've been away from this project for so long now. So during that time, I went back to it and reread it. I did a little research. I saw some places where I wanted to flesh things out. So it was about like a reluctant theme park princess. So I started watching videos of, Disney princesses, former Disney princesses, like talking about, sharing some of their experiences. And I was watching like Six Flags videos of former employees. So I was just kind of really soaking up everything, trying to get myself back into that theme park,
Getting into that headspace.
Yeah. Right. Yes. And then I decided to, I felt like I was halfway through the book at that time. So it was my first chick lit novel. I'd published some mysteries and young adult books, but this was a totally new genre for me. So I wound up in July, I hired an editor who specialized like in chick lit and like romantic comedy. And I wanted to get some feedback just from before I went any further, just to kind of, bounce some ideas off of her. And then she had some, great suggestions. In fact, it even turned out she did an internship at Disney World. So she was very familiar with like the whole theme parks. It was almost like meant to be. And
I mean, you mentioned editors there. This is something I wanted to kind of touch on, because I know this is an area that we've worked in yourself. And I know you've got lots of great tips and strategies for simplifying the process of writing. I know that's something you're very keen on, as am I, because it's hugely important at the moment in terms of increasing productivity. We all know that productivity is the single biggest key to success in writing and publishing in 2020 and beyond. I mean, what would you say? I know it's difficult to distill things down for a podcast, but what would you say are perhaps some of the most important strategies you've found for streamlining that writing progress, for increasing that productivity and making sure that when you do get that small amount of time for writing in a very busy life, that time is used most productively?
I think it's just important to like know, like, your character, like how is that character going to change, and make sure you have enough in the middle. I see as like, that was actually before I was an editor myself, but now I'm a freelance editor myself, and I see a lot of sagging middles. And, I felt like, I had some writing experience, then I'd had some books under my belt, and I just felt like at that midpoint, there was something before I went any further. I felt like I needed to bounce this idea off of someone. And she just kind of helped it reinvigorate me and see it in a different way, especially since she had that specialty. So I think it's important to just, I'm very much a planner. So, I like to plan things like with the 3 act structure and, have like a character arc, and I'd like to know what's happening in every scene. And I think when I was writing at that time, I was still feeling a little bit stuck, and then just bouncing the ideas off of somebody, even if you bounce ideas off like a beta reader or something like that, or just sometimes just talking about it with somebody, even like your family member. I was brainstorming with my husband a bit. I think that can just help get you more excited about it and get you unstuck. And working with her, getting her feedback, that was just what I needed at that time to just get me unstuck. And then from then on, I think it's important to when you do feel like you can start devoting yourself to that project again, then you have to set up some like weekly goals for yourself. That depends, I think, based on like how much time you have, like whether you have a full-time job or, whatever, you do what you can. But even if you just work like a few minutes a day on it, that will add up. And in my case, once my kids went back to school, I did have that time to devote to it. So I was able to like set a goal of maybe like a half.
Oh, Stacy has stuttered a little bit there. I'm not sure if we've lost connectivity with her, but Andy, you appear to be back.
There.
Sorry. This is what happens when we record as live, you see.
Yeah.
You're saying there about having that few minutes in the day, and I know a lot of people only have a few minutes in the day. They can only do half an hour at the most. Perhaps they've got busy lives, they've got kids, they've got full-time jobs, and what have you. So you covered there. You mentioned a couple of productivity tips for making the most of that, knowing your characters and knowing where they're going, the journey they're going on, knowing them before you start writing, planning ahead so that you don't get that sagging middle that so many writers struggle with. And I know myself. I mean, for me, I have that sagging 2/3 instead, because I have that 3-act structure with my books. I know the beginning, I know the middle, I know the end. So there's normally a big event that happens in the middle. So I'm okay there. I'm okay building to that. But from the middle to the end is where I have that trouble, where I'm deep in the woods and I just don't know how to get back out again. That's the issue I sometimes have. So yeah, they're great productivity strategies there, great tips. I know that you've also created a course and some other resources for writers as well. We're going to pop a link to your website and the show notes for anybody who's interested in that. But to summarize, what would you say perhaps is, if we can distill it down to this, your single biggest tip for an indie author today?
I think you have to be very disciplined. And just, if it's your goal, it is a difference between writing like for a hobby and writing for publication. And if your goal is to write for publication, then you just realize that it is a lot of work. It is a commitment. But I think writing is also a passion. And if you have that passion and enthusiasm, that will help carry you through it. So it comes down a lot to just, having that discipline, getting into that mindset so that you take advantage of the time that you have, and you just have a plan for every day. Like I always like give myself like a little list of what I want to, what's coming up next in the book, what's coming up next in that scene. And, if each thing I accomplished on that little list, and would just kind of reinvigorate me and make me feel satisfied. So like more about, don't look at the big goal of, getting that book done, because that can be like a monumental goal. Just look at the, really celebrate the smaller wins, like getting, reaching the half point of the scene and then finishing that scene and starting a new chapter.
Yeah, there's an old saying, isn't there? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. Celebrate every bite, and you're one step closer to eating that elephant. I know that lots of people have, they struggle to find the time at all. And you mentioned people who are writing as a hobby, and of course that's absolutely fine. But I think there's nothing wrong as well with giving yourself time for a hobby. I think if it is just a hobby, and it's the Indie Author Mindset podcast, most people listening are listening because they're interested in the business side of writing, they're interested in making a career from it. But even if somebody is listening to this and they're thinking, well, it's just a hobby, I'm not interested in making money for it, how can I prioritize it? I think that is the key. I think prioritizing it for yourself, for your own health and happiness. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with giving yourself half an hour a day doing something that makes you happy and that will feed into all other areas of your life. Right.
And sometimes I do journaling. I have do different journaling prompts, and that's just sort of like for me. And so sometimes even if you are writing for publication, sometimes it's just you don't want to lose sight of why you got into the writing in the first place, because it's fun. And I think it becomes about, sometimes you just want to write for yourself, and everything you write doesn't have to be about making money. It doesn't have to be always about the product. So you just want to maintain that love of writing, and
it can be a therapy in itself, can't it?
Definitely.
Well, thank you for sharing those tips with us, Stacey. Sorry it's so brief. It always is on this podcast. I always try to keep it short and sweet. And if you have enjoyed this podcast, listening to it today, and if you're getting value from the Indie Author Mindset community, and I truly hope you are, please do consider joining the Indie Author Mindset Patreon program. If you join today, you get a personalized thank you on a future episode of the podcast, a free book of your choice, access to exclusive articles and strategies for indie authors, which are posted in the group and nowhere else. You get priority one-on-one help and coaching from me, and all sorts of things, all from just $2, which is $2, which could help revolutionize your career. It also helps me keep the project running and empowering indie authors and helping to build a better future for you. So check out the link in the show notes, or head over to patreon.com/indie author mindset. Thank you for joining me today, Stacey. Hopefully we'll hear from you again soon. As I say, we'll put some links in the show notes to those tips and strategies and bits and bobs that you have there as well.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us. This episode of the Indie Author Mindset podcast was presented by me, Adam Croft. The Indie Author Mindset podcast is sponsored by Ingram Spark, helping you get your book into over 40,000 bookstores and libraries worldwide. Get started today at ingramspark.com. The theme music for this podcast is by the Caesareans. Don't forget you can claim 50% off any Indie Author Mindset course by entering the promo code podcast at the checkout. Links are in the show notes. For more great tips and guidance, join the Indie Author Mindset group on Facebook.